It is the end of an era. Tonight, the iconic Late Show on CBS will close forever. After nearly 11 years as host, Stephen Colbert will sign off one last time. CBS is promoting an extended Late Show series finale. CBS canceled the show.
On Thursday night, the historic Ed Sullivan Theater quietly went dark. CBS told the world that canceling the Late Show with Stephen Colbert was just a standard budget cut, a simple casualty of a declining television market. But they aren't telling you the whole story. Behind the scenes of an impending multi-billion-dollar corporate merger, the network's top-rated host and the administration's sharpest critic became an immediate liability. This wasn't a financial decision. It was a calculated corporate execution, and fans are absolutely furious. The official story and the silent corporate coup. When the news broke that the Late Show with Colbert was getting chopped, CBS executives immediately scrambled to their favorite safety blanket, the corporate ledger. They rolled out network president George Cheeks to drop some absolutely brutal numbers on the public. According to the network brass, the legendary late-night show was burning a massive, unfixable hole in their pockets, losing somewhere around $40 million a year. The network blamed a secular decline in the linear television advertising market. Now, that is just a bunch of fancy, high-level corporate speak for a very simple reality. Traditional TV commercials just do not make the kind of money they used to make. To anyone just casually scrolling through their news feed or reading the entertainment headlines, it looked like a standard case of cold, hard American capitalism. It just looked like another old-school television network cutting its losses, shrinking its overhead, and trying to survive the brutal onslaught of the streaming era. But if you actually sit down and look at the real timeline of how this went down, the network's math completely falls apart. CBS dropped the bomb that they were canceling the show last summer, which gave their highest-rated host a weird year-long countdown to his own eviction notice. When you really think about it, the whole thing smells fishy. Why on earth would a major television network completely kill a 33-year-old television institution, a show that had securely held the absolute #1 spot in the late-night ratings for 9 straight years just because of a tight budget? That is just not how Hollywood works. Normally, if a network is running low on cash but owns a massive top-rated hit show, they do some routine belt-tightening. They trim the production staff. They renegotiate talent contracts. They cut down on expensive travel segments, or they find cheaper studio space. What they absolutely do not do is burn the entire franchise to the ground, lock the doors to the theater, and sell off the time slot to the highest bidder. You don't throw away the crown jewel of your late-night lineup unless there is a much bigger, much darker motive hiding behind closed doors. The real catalyst for this corporate hit job lies right beneath the surface of an $8 billion power play. At the exact same time CBS was quietly plotting Colbert's exit from the airwaves, its parent company, Paramount Global, was desperately trying to finalize a massive, high-stakes merger with Skydance Media. In the cutthroat world of media mega deals, getting an $8 billion transaction across the finish line requires total smooth sailing through the federal government and the Federal Communications Commission. And suddenly, having a late-night host who happened to be the absolute sharpest, most relentless critic of the political establishment night after night wasn't a badge of honor for the network anymore. It was a terrifying, unpredictable liability that could easily derail a historic, multi-billion-dollar payday for the board of directors. The big bosses did not want to risk angering the people in power who held the keys to approving their massive merger. The pressure cooker completely boiled over just 48 hours before the network made the official cancellation announcement. On live television, Colbert delivered a scorching, merciless monologue that ruthlessly mocked a highly controversial $16 million legal settlement between Paramount and federal investigators over a suppressed 60 Minutes report. Colbert didn't just gently bite the hand that fed him, he bit it right off at the wrist, openly laughing at corporate bribes and backroom political deals in front of millions of viewers. For the big bosses steering the Skydance merger through those tricky political waters, that monologue was the absolute final straw. Colbert was a loose cannon they simply couldn't afford to protect or finance anymore. The network needed to protect its billions, and The Late Show became the ultimate bargaining chip to keep the peace. By wrapping his forced exit in a neat little bow and calling it a purely financial decision, CBS tried to quietly scrub its lineup of political friction without leaving any corporate fingerprints behind. They desperately wanted us to believe that a bad ad market killed the show, masking a calculated act of corporate censorship as nothing more than routine downsizing. Corporate executives expected the public to quietly accept the math, but they severely underestimated the wrath of a loyal audience. Fans in outrage. If CBS executives honestly thought they could just quietly slide this cancellation past the public without anyone noticing, they were living in total fantasy land. The second the news broke, the internet absolutely exploded. Fans were not just disappointed, they were completely furious, and they flooded social media to scream corporate censorship. Nobody was buying the network's dry financial excuses. To the millions of viewers who tuned in every night, it felt like a blatant, spineless surrender to political pressure. The immediate audience reaction at the next live taping said it all. A wall of loud, angry boos echoed through the Ed Sullivan Theater the moment Colbert addressed the elephant in the room. But the outrage did not just stop with angry tweets and petition links. It rippled all the way through Hollywood, sparking a massive wave of solidarity from some of the biggest names in the entertainment industry. A newly relaunched Committee for the First Amendment quickly put together a fiery video protest featuring high-profile stars who refused to sit back and watch a late-night icon get silenced. Marvel star Mark Ruffalo publicly stated he was deeply disturbed by how the network handled the situation. Hollywood legend Jane Fonda stepped forward with a stinging rebuke, pointing out that Colbert made the country laugh and never flinched, while warning that the public was watching a powerful administration actively suppress dissent. Even music icon Bruce Springsteen showed up as a guest on one of the final episodes to lay it all out on the line. Standing right next to Colbert, Springsteen told the audience that Stephen was the first guy in America to lose his talk show simply because the country has a president who absolutely cannot take a joke. Perhaps the most damaging blow to CBS's official narrative came from late-night royalty itself. David Letterman, the man who literally built the Late Show franchise from scratch 33 years ago, did not hold back his disgust. In a brutally honest interview, Letterman publicly called the cancellation a huge mistake, arguing that the country was losing a vital perspective that is deeply important to American culture. Behind the scenes, the late-night community rallied together in a rare show of unified anger. On his own show, an incredibly frustrated Jimmy Kimmel did not mince words, telling Colbert on air that he wanted to see angry Stephen come out and address the sheer outrage of his top-rated show being thrown off the air. Of course, the loudest reaction came from the one place you would expect. The sitting president immediately took to social media to gloat about the cancellation, completely giving away the political undercurrent of the whole ordeal. He gleefully posted that Colbert was finally finished at CBS, calling him a pathetic train wreck with no talent and a total jerk. The administration even took things a step further, posting a bizarre AI-generated video clip that showed the president literally dumping Colbert into a giant green trash can. It was a stunningly immature victory lap that totally exposed the truth. The network could scream about a declining ad market all day long. But when the leader of the free world is dancing on your show's grave with AI videos, the mask is completely off. The fans knew it, Hollywood knew it, and the corporate bosses knew it. Colbert hadn't failed at his job. He had done it so well that the people in power felt they had no choice but to take him off the board. With the battle lines drawn between the fans and the network, all eyes turned to the historic stage where it would all come to an end. The finale, Joy Machine versus Interdimensional Wormhole. Despite all the heavy political drama swirling outside the theater, Stephen Colbert refused to let his final night turn into a bitter, angry sob story. He had a solid year to process the network's decision, and when Thursday night, May 21st, 2026, finally arrived, he decided to throw the ultimate block party. In his very last opening monologue, he looked out at the emotional crowd inside the historic Ed Sullivan Theater and chose to frame the whole experience around one simple word: joy. He openly praised his hard-working crew, calling the massive daily operation a joy machine. He beautifully explained to the audience that to crank out over 1,800 episodes, the production absolutely has to run like a machine. But if you choose to run it with pure joy, it doesn't hurt quite as much when your fingers get caught in the corporate gears. Once the monologue wrapped up, the show completely abandoned the standard talk show format and dissolved into a brilliantly chaotic, star-studded wonderland. Instead of sitting down for standard promotional interviews, Colbert leaned heavily into a running gag about an interdimensional wormhole that kept spitting out random high-profile celebrity cameos. Bryan Cranston showed up early to do a hilarious bit, mocking how forced and scripted surprise celebrity TV appearances always feel. Comedy star Tim Meadows angrily stormed out of the theater after screaming, "You got what you deserved," right to Colbert's face. The wormhole just kept on giving, delivering a wild parade of massive names, including Paul Rudd, Ryan Reynolds, Elijah Wood, Tig Notaro, and even astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. In a truly surreal moment, Jon Stewart walked onto the stage to give his old friend a proper send-off. Colbert looked at Stewart and confessed, "I didn't think my show would end like this, but I'm still incredibly grateful." The absolute peak of the night came when the show displayed a level of late-night industry solidarity that we have never seen before. The competing titans of late night, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, and John Oliver, all walked out on stage together to pay their respects. Kimmel looked at the host and said, "Late night is simply not going to be the same without you." In a completely unprecedented move of respect that stunned the television industry, both Kimmel and Fallon actually chose to air reruns in their normal time slots that Thursday night, intentionally encouraging their own viewers to change the channel and watch Colbert say his final goodbye. To wrap up 33 years of The Late Show history, Colbert brought out the ultimate final guest, rock legend Sir Paul McCartney. It was a poetic, full-circle moment for the iconic venue, as McCartney was returning to the exact same stage where the Beatles made their historic American debut back in 1964. McCartney sat down with Colbert for a brief chat, beautifully reminding everyone that America was the birthplace of all the rock and roll and blues that the world fell in love with. calling it the land of the free, the greatest democracy, hopefully. The grand finale closed with an epic, emotional musical number that will go down in television history. McCartney grabbed his bass and led a massive, star-studded performance of the Beatles' classic song, Hello, Goodbye. Colbert's family, the entire studio audience, and every single celebrity guest crowded onto the stage to sing along. Music icon Elvis Costello, former band leader John Batiste, and current leader Louis Cato all joined in on the vocals, turning a forced corporate cancellation into a triumphant, unifying celebration of art and friendship. It was a masterclass in bidding farewell, but this wasn't Colbert's first time completely rewriting the rules of political comedy, from The Daily Show to the conservative caricature. To fully grasp why corporate executives were shaking in their boots over Stephen Colbert in 2026, you have to trace it all back to the satirical powerhouse he brought to life 2 decades prior. He didn't just stumble into becoming a political target, he practically went to school for it. Long before he ever sat behind the desk at CBS, Colbert was sharpening his teeth as a correspondent on Jon Stewart's legendary era of The Daily Show on Comedy Central. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, he developed a very specific, deeply satirical comedic style. He played the part of a well-intentioned, poorly informed, high-status idiot, the kind of clueless reporter who cared way more about how good his hair looked on camera than actually finding the truth. But it was in 2005 that Colbert pulled off one of the greatest creative gambits in television history with his own spin-off series, The Colbert Report. Instead of just doing a standard joke show, he committed to a total method acting performance. He created a fictional, hyper-conservative, deeply narcissistic alter ego named Stephen Colbert, spelled exactly the same way, but with a silent T to sound extra pretentious. The character was a brilliant, razor-sharp parody of cable news talking heads like Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity. For 9 straight years, Colbert stayed completely in character, wrapping himself in the American flag, shouting about truthiness and pretending to love the political establishment while completely tearing it down from the inside out. The absolute peak of this era happened in April 2006, and it remains one of the gutsiest moments in modern media. Colbert was invited to be the featured entertainer at the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner. The organizer who booked him later admitted he hadn't really watched the show and had no idea what he was getting into. Colbert walked up to the podium, stood just a few feet away from President George W. Bush, and delivered a blistering 16-minute satirical beatdown directly to the president's face. While the room of politicians and journalists sat in a stunned, dead-silent panic, Colbert aggressively praised the administration for ignoring reality. He famously joked that the president was a man who believed the exact same thing on Wednesday that he believed on Monday, regardless of what actually happened on Tuesday. He ruthlessly mocked the Iraq War, unlawful spying, and the mainstream media's complete failure to ask tough questions. It was incredibly uncomfortable, deeply controversial, and it instantly made him a folk hero to millions of Americans who felt completely gaslit by the government. By the time he wrapped up his run on cable television, Colbert had proven something dangerous to the suits in Hollywood. He wasn't just a comedian looking for a cheap laugh. He was a highly disciplined, politically lethal weapon who knew exactly how to use satire to expose corporate greed and political hypocrisy. He had spent a decade playing a character so perfectly that he completely rewrote the rules of political comedy, setting up a massive clash of cultures for his next big career move. Yet playing a character can only take you so far, and eventually, the man behind the mask had to step into the brightest spotlight on network television. The aftermath: is late-night television dead? So, where does late-night comedy go from here? The short, incredibly depressing answer is that it might not go anywhere at all. By permanently retiring the 33-year-old Late Show franchise, CBS didn't just fire a shot at Stephen Colbert, they effectively declared the entire genre dead on arrival. Instead of looking for a bold new comedic voice to take over the historic Ed Sullivan Theater, network executives made a move that perfectly signals the cheap, unscripted, and entirely safe future of broadcast television. They sold off the midnight time slot to Byron Allen's Allen Media Group, replacing a powerhouse political satire show with Comics Unleashed, a low-budget, syndicated stand-up series that costs practically pennies to produce. It is the ultimate corporate dream: maximum profit, zero political risk, and absolutely no controversial monologues to anger federal regulators or jeopardize multi-billion-dollar mergers. This tragic changing of the guard proves that the cancellation of The Late Show was never actually about a declining ad market or a simple shift in ratings. It was a historic moment of political capitulation. When corporate media companies care more about smooth sailing for their mega mergers than protecting free speech and sharp cultural commentary, everyone loses. For over a decade, Colbert provided a nightly sanctuary for millions of Americans, a place where we could look at the absolute chaos of the political landscape, feel the weight of the news together, and somehow find a way to laugh our way through the dark. By forcing him off the airwaves to satisfy the egos of the powerful, the network executives didn't just silence a late-night icon. They left a massive, echoing void in American culture, leaving the rest of us to watch the marquee lights fade out on an entire era of political satire. And that is the real tragedy here. We didn't just lose a television show, we lost one of the last remaining places on network TV where someone was willing to look the establishment in the eye and call out the chaos for exactly what it was. As the late-night landscape shrinks and corporate boards tighten their grip, you have to wonder who will be left to tell us the truth when the world goes completely mad. Stephen Colbert's forced exit marks the official death of fearless late-night satire. When corporate mergers and political egos team up to silence the sharpest voice on television, the audience loses the ultimate sanctuary. What do you think? The conversation doesn't stop here. Hit that subscribe button to never miss an update.